Good evening, residents of Everett, Washington. I would like to call to order the Everett City Council meeting of June 26, 2024. The City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington's Open Public Meeting Act. Community members are welcome to join either in person, remote via Zoom, or by calling in. For those who wish to participate in the future via Zoom, you'll find the instructions to register for public comment on the City of Everett website under City Council Department. Please note that we do not allow comments of any kind of campaigning, whether for or against ballot measures or candidates running for office. We also do not accept comments focused on personal matters that are unrelated to city business. We ask that the audience refrain from clapping, cheering, or booing, and no signage of any kind are allowed in the chambers. We ask that everyone take a seat and not gather in the entryway area. Thank you for that. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Mayor Franklin. Here. Councilmember Ryan. Here. Councilmember Bader.
Here.
Councilmember Toohey.
Here.
Councilmember Vogely.
Here.
Councilmember Fossey.
Here.
Vice President Zarlingo.
Here.
President Schwab.
Here. At this time, I'd like to ask Councilmember Ryan to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Please stand if you are able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'd like to ask Councilmember Bader to read the land acknowledgement.
The City Council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Stohocha people, and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion for approval of the minutes for June 12th, 2024?
So move.
Second.
Motion and seconds made. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Councilmember Bader.
Yes.
Councilmember Toohey.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes.
Councilmember Fossey.
Yes.
Vice President Zarlingo.
Yes.
President Schwab.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, President Schwab and council, community. Just a few things to share tonight. Last week, we had our final drug crisis task force meeting that we put together back in January. And they've been working for the last few months and made some great recommendations for us. They're putting together the final report, so I look forward to sharing that with you all soon. I definitely wanted to thank our co-chairs, Donna from Housing Hope, who is actually here this evening, hi, and Jonathan from Fortive, as well as all the task force members, and Councilmember Ryan, who served as the liaison for that task force as well. For education for the community, we have a few information sessions about Proposition 1 that the city is hosting on Tuesday, July 9th from 5:30 to 7 at the Everett Public Library is the first one, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Saturday, July 27th, 11:30 to 1 p.m. at the Evergreen Branch, and Tuesday, July 30th, 5:30 to 7 at the Warehouser Room. There's no registration required, but you can find information on our website about this, and it's a great place to learn about Proposition 1 and get any questions answered. Of course, next week is the July 4th holiday, so I hope we're all busy celebrating and enjoy the city-sponsored fireworks show, but not fireworks in the comfort of your own home, because that's illegal in Everett. But really hope that you'll join us for the parade and the other festivities that are going on, and I assume Councilmember Bader might share something under his comments as well, because he's been volunteering to put together some of that work, but it'll be a great holiday. And then my final announcement before I welcome our new officers is I'm very excited to announce that our first public restroom that we've been working on for many, many months and years. It takes a long time for things to happen in cities, but it's been a dream of mine for far too long that we have downtown public restrooms. And that will be opening on July 1st, and it's right next to the EMB. It'll be a great space for those attending our downtown festivals or just shopping and going about your business downtown right next to the farmers market. So look forward to opening that. And with that, I would love to invite Chief DeRoos forward to welcome our two new officers. Thank you.
Buenas noches, alcalde y dirigentes municipales. Estoy emocionado de presentar a dos de nuestros oficiales más nuevos. Sus familias son de México y Honduras, por lo que quiero hacer su presentación en español. Ambos oficiales se graduaron de la Academia de this is the hard one. Aplicación de la Ley del Estado de Washington el 13 de junio. No solo son excelentes empleados, sino que también representan un ejemplo de la creciente diversidad del Departamento de Policía de Everett. Esperemos que sean parte de una larga tradición de oficiales de policía que lleguen en nuestro departamento desde todos los ámbitos de la vida. Ruben? I'd like to introduce Ruben Oviedo. Ruben was born in Monroe, but his family settled down in Everett when he was 10 years old. He graduated from Kamiak High School in 2018. After graduating high school, Ruben attended Everett Community College, where he studied chemistry and accounting. Prior to being hired by Everett PD, Ruben worked as an office manager at a driving school. However, Ruben wanted to work in a field where he could help people in various ways. He knew law enforcement could provide him with those opportunities. Ruben grew up on Casino Road and had many opportunities to interact with Everett officers and see them doing their jobs. He noted that our officers' professionalism and the respect they had for the community is what made him want to be part of Everett PD. Now, as an officer, Ruben is looking forward to interacting with people in Everett and making a positive impact on our community. In his free time, Ruben enjoys working out, playing the guitar and piano for his church, listening to music, and solving complicated math problems. Family is very important to Ruben, and he tries his best to spend quality time with them. Brian. Now I'll introduce Brian Cruz. Brian was born and raised in the Bronx and graduated from Cardinal Hayes High School in 2017. After graduating, he served a two-year mission in Honduras. Following his mission, he attended Brigham Young University in Idaho, where he received an associate degree in general studies in 2023. And he is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in business management. Prior to joining EPD, Brian worked as a customer service manager for a transportation shuttle service. He wanted a career that gave him a sense of purpose, so he decided to pursue law enforcement, where he could live a life dedicated to that service. Brian was drawn to EPD as an agency because it was busy. It operated with integrity and professionalism, offered many specialty assignments, and prides itself in helping others every day. Brian joins EPD with his wife Meredith. The two moved to Skagit County from Idaho, and in their free time they enjoy traveling, fishing, and taking walks with their dog. I'd like to introduce both Brian Cruz and Ruben Oviedo. Brian's family immigrated from Mexico, and Ruben's family immigrated from Honduras. That's why I did the introduction in Spanish. They said it was okay. And we're all very proud of how diverse our department is getting. So, Council President, I'd like to introduce these two officers for swearing in.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to accept Brian Cruz and Ruben Oviedo?
So moved to accept both officers.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Ryan?
See.
Councilmember Bader?
Yes.
Councilmember Tui?
Yes.
Councilmember Fogley?
See.
Councilmember Fosse?
Yes.
Vice President Zarlingo?
Yes.
President Schwab?
Yes.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Ruben Oviedo,
I, Brian Cruz,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I am a citizen of the United States
that I am a citizen of the United States
or a lawful permanent resident,
or a lawful permanent resident,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the State of Washington,
the Constitution and the laws of
the State of
Washington,
and the charter and ordinances
and charter and
and
ordinances
ordinances
of the City of Everett,
of the City of Everett,
and that I will faithfully,
and that I will faithfully,
honestly, and impartially
honestly, and impartially
perform the duties of police officer
perform the duties of police officer
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Welcome again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Congratulations. And with that, no further comment this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Now it's time for public comment, which includes written comment acknowledgement. Under our rules, written comments shall be considered in the same manner as oral comments. The commenter must provide their name and city of residence. Written comments submitted without that information will be read, will be just set on the side. Angie, do you have anything for us?
Good evening, President Chua. We do have some written comments and public commenters. So I'll read the written comments first. And the following names wrote in regarding minimum wage increase.
Okay.
Tina Vlasity, Jesse Avila, Angela Jolly, Sandy Higgins, Don Peter, Luke Blackwell, Aaron Reynolds, and Tom Lane. And then John Peoples wrote in about flock safety. And I've provided these to council, legal, city clerk, and administration to be part of the record. We have one individual online. If Mr. Peoples could unmute and share your camera if possible. And you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I'm going to share my timer so you can monitor the time. And when you're ready, please state your full name and city of residence, and go ahead.
John Peoples, Everett, Washington. And thank you very much for listening to my comments. You have written copies, so I'll be very brief. I very much appreciate Chief Terus's and everyone's effort and sincere desire to drive down crime in various neighborhoods in the city. I just am still very much opposed to the use of the flock devices. And part of the reason for that is the flock devices, to me, cast too wide a net and put innocent people on the public record. And so contrast that, for instance, with a simple license plate reader. I am very much for the use of the license plate readers because they enable the human police officers to reduce or alleviate the tedium of having to read each and every one of perhaps hundreds of license plates looking for several dozen stolen vehicles. So I consider that okay because it relieves tedium and it doesn't make the city or the police officer superhuman, which is what happens with a fixed license plate reader. Also, I don't see any plan for specific named criminal activity that the city council is trying to reduce, and what metrics they will measure, and then what criteria would automatically enable the city council to decommission the flock instruments. So I'd like those things to be considered. And just to remember that laws passed by fallible human beings on the city council should be enforced as a public service by similarly fallible human police officers. The burden should be on the government to prove wrongdoing on the part of the citizen. The burden should not be on the citizen to prove his innocence. Let's see, and that should do it. I look forward to seeing you all next month. And happy 4th of July, everybody. Go America.
Thank you. We'll move to those in chambers. So if Marion could please come to the podium. And please press the right button on the base of the microphone and state your full name, city of residence, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, my name's Marion Robinson, excuse my voice, and I live in Everett. I actually live in the 1400 block of Colby Avenue. And the reason I'm here is to talk about the Colby Strip trees. And I don't know how much everybody is fully aware of the issue. I've lived in my house for 32 years, and it was June 32 years ago that I actually called the Parks Department for the first time to ask what was wrong with the trees. The minute they start leafing out, the leaves were dropping like, it was the fall. And they told me at the time that the trees were diseased and that they were the wrong type of tree to plant in that environment. But they were planted because they were a fast-growing tree. And so, fast forward to today, I've been through 3 Parks Department administrations, I think, working with this. I've been to Parks Board meetings, I've written emails, I have bags, I have letters. But the problem with the trees, it's that particular type of tree. It has anthracnose, which causes it to defoliate the minute they get their leaves in the early summer. And then they drop their leaves through the whole summer until they refoliate, and it's a process that goes on for about 9 months. Well, it's difficult to live with when you live there, but the other problem with the trees is that the type of trees they have what's called a trichome fiber on the leaves, which is this stuff. And it's actually a proven lung and skin irritant, which I think might explain my voice sometimes if I've been outside for too long. But it's in the air. It affects everybody in our block. It causes breathing issues. It's a problem not only for it's from 10th to 19th Street. There's 65 trees left. When I first moved in, there was almost 90. And so to have those type of trees in such a condensed urban environment, this is not a tree that anybody recommends planting in the cities anymore. And it's actually a problem all over the world. I've come to find out through my research. There's actually research papers on the National Institutes of Health website about these trees and what they can cause. We call it, some places they call it the Chelsea cough. That's what they call it in Australia. We call it the Colby cough. And you just literally can't be outside sometimes. In the evening when the wind kicks up and this stuff is blowing around in the air, you can see it. It lands on everything, your cars. You're breathing it. And the city has a plan in place, or the Parks Department, to replace these trees as they, fail. So I'm going to have to come back every week, probably the next year, to finish my story. But anyway, that was part 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Alan, if you could please.
Just so you know, if you wanted to email us, you can email more details, and then staff will look into this. I'm very familiar with this. We've talked about it in the team, and I know that we have a plan, but I need to follow up with them and get more up to speed. So if you want to email us directly, and then we'll try to get more information before you come back again.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, could you please come to the podium? And please state your full name and city of residence, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
I find it's awful hard to hear back in this section. I don't know if the volume can be turned up a little. I've got 3 items tonight. Good evening. The first item is I'm trying to get an update on my request for a 4-way stop on 21st and Rucker. I think Judy, you'd mentioned last time I was here that we were going to look into it. Any updates on that? Okay, not yet. Okay. It is really needed there. That traffic is really heavy and speeding. The second item is I've recently been educated about the running invasive bamboo. And my neighbor is at wit's end on how to address the invasive bamboo that originated on her neighbor's yard and has overrun her house and yard, and the bamboo is traveling down into Forgotten Creek, which is a no-no. That's part of the city of Everett. So it's, I think it's very important that we address this immediately and get on it and help this this neighbor and find out how we can put a situation to just cool it down and get rid of this bamboo. And please give me a call and I'll give you the address and the contact people. Third item is I was over on one of my rental properties today and looked across the street. And boy, I was hit with another bamboo situation. I sent around 4 different pictures here. The ones with the bamboo, her whole backyard is filled with this stuff. There must be 50 to 75 shoots coming up. And it's heading right towards the creek there, and it's already over the fence. It's starting down the bank. But she's at wit's end. She's talked to an attorney, and she doesn't want to go that route, but the neighbors are not cooperative and getting this situation taken care of. You basically have to dig up all this root and dispose of it, and herbicides really don't work all that well, and it's just a pain. And I'm concerned about my property because, as you see in the picture, these shoots are all 6 inches to a foot tall, and they're right up to the street. And they're going to crawl right under that street and destroy the street and start it affecting all the neighbors there. And she has, I suppose, at least 50 feet of this bamboo right as a border along the street there. So it's bad news. And I don't know how the city can help if they can go out and talk to this person and help to get that stuff pulled up, or, you know, if we have to get an attorney involved. And you know, it's going to be an expensive procedure if we don't get to it right away. So my name's there, and I'd like, you know, you can contact me, and also I'd like a little update on the 21st and Rucker to see if we can slow traffic down there and prevent an accident. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have
Okay,
one,
and just so council, I'll work with staff to follow up on his issues as well and get back to you on that next week, hopefully.
we have one other individual, but they wish to wait until item 15.
Item 15, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, all right, so I guess it's time for council comments and liaison reports. Councilmember Rem.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Happy last Wednesday of Pride Month. Let's see, it's been 2 weeks, so everybody gets 2 weeks of updates from me. So I attended the Lowell Neighborhood Association meeting a couple Mondays ago, and they're busy planning their neighborhood night out, which will be at Lowell Park from 5 to 7 p.m. on Tuesday, August 6th, when all of the neighborhood night outs will be. They shared that there's a bunch of blackberries in front of the Lowell Park sign, and hopefully those get cleared out by the time Neighborhood Night Out works comes around. But just wanted to remind everybody about the Everett at Work app, where if you see something in your neighborhood, such as blackberries covering your park sign, you can report it through the app, and it can get sent off to the right team and can get handled quickly. So check that out in your app store. I also attended the Valley View Neighborhood Association meeting, and I wanted to give a shout out to Corey Hart, who's here in the audience today. Glad he's here. He did a fantastic job of a very quick turnaround to address a parking concern by the neighborhood, and they were all very pleased at the magnificent speed of government on that request. So thank you, Corey, for your hard work on that. And then last night, the Historic Commission meeting was canceled, so I had a chance to attend the Beverly Park Pinehurst Neighborhood Association meeting. Councilmember Zarlingo and I share that neighborhood. We split it between our districts, so thank you for covering for me all these months, and I was glad to give you a break with that Tuesday. And another shout out to Corey and the roads team. The neighbors had been having a frustration about speed issues where Beverly and Broadway split when you're coming from the mall area. And the roads team did a great job of putting in some traffic calming measures. They reported that they see a teeny tiny bit of an improvement, but they really appreciate the effort and just the consideration to work with the neighborhood. So I have a couple more requests that they had shared at the meeting that I can follow up offline as well. And then also at the meeting, Claudia from Sharing Wheels shared about their free bike repair clinic. So the closest one is every second Tuesday at the Evergreen Branch Library from 3 to 6 p.m. You can bring your bike if it needs any type of repair, and they can help with the tools and expertise to get that fixed up. And then the Beverly Park neighborhood's also planning a neighborhood night out at Lions Park from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. With face painting, games, and snacks. Last Thursday, I attended the final Mayor's Drug Task Force meeting and had a chance to read through the draft report. I'm really glad to see such amazing recommendations, and congratulate the group on a job very well done. And I also appreciate the commitment from the mayor and administration to make sure that the recommendations in the report turn into actionable items. So there's definitely more to come on that. Last Thursday, I also took my kiddos to the Everett Station District Alliance Town Hall, and the kids spun all of the wheels at all of the resource tables, and it's just a great activation of the space, and I'm really glad to see the good work that ESDA is doing. And then it's getting longer than I was expecting, so I guess I'll skip a couple things, but just also wanted to mention that I wanted to share about that I stand in solidarity with the Everett News Guild and the writers and staff at our Everett Herald. I believe that protecting and preserving local journalism is key to an informed and engaged community. So just wanted to send a shout out and support for our local paper. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Council President. Had the good fortune to attend the one day of the Association of Washington Cities meeting or conference, annual conference last week, and some great presentations there. A couple of notable ones, one about managing difficult conversations with constituents and the importance of getting information out in front of people as quickly as possible. I think maybe the conversation we're going to hear about today that happened between the Delta neighborhood and the Housing Authority might be a good example of that based on what the information we've seen and what I heard at the conference and plaudits on that one. And actually, the speaker talked about the great effort in terms of civic civility that county council members Meade and Naring have been leading as well. So good conversation there. There was another one about moving from vacant space to vibrant places, and they actually used Lake Stevens as an example of some good things that have happened there, using very interesting data to bring businesses in and at highest and best use, helping to maximize civic revenue or city revenue while also bringing in more amenities for the citizens and residents there. And then a great keynote on bringing life to cities by the author Peter Kageyama, author of the book For the Love of Cities. Really intriguing ideas. I wish there was a PowerPoint available on that. I'd love to share it with all of you, but so far I've not been able to find that they have a PowerPoint available of that presentation. But it was a really great one. I'm grateful for the opportunity to go to that Association of Washington Cities meeting. And then, as the mayor alluded to, obviously the 4th of July parade next week. This is our last meeting before the 4th. This year we're up to 70 entries. entries in the parade, and so a nice step up from the somewhat over 50 we had last year, including 2 bands. I think we have 1 float, and a lot of good entries just from the community. So I think people will find it a fun time, and just a great shout out and thanks to a core group of about a half a dozen volunteers and about 40 day of volunteers that are going to give up a good chunk of their 4th of July to help the community celebrate the 4th of July as well. So obviously hoping for good weather and a good turnout. And so some good stuff happening. So thanks, Council President.
Thank you. Councilmember Tui.
I don't have an update tonight, just want to wish everybody a safe and happy 4th of July.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely.
Good evening, everybody. I also stand with the local journalists at the Herald. Just want to put that out there for everybody to hear. And I went to both Pride Fest and Pride in the Park, and it was mostly rainy at the Pride Festival, but Pride in the Park still had a bit of rain. And it was fun regardless, and my whole family went and we had a great time. So thank you to all involved. And I have been using the bus a lot, not only because I think, as the mayor mentioned, it's Ride the Bus Month, but my husband's car is dead, and so he gets to use mine to go to work far, far away. And I get to walk and ride the bus. And so far, it has been good. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Fosse.
Thank you, and huge welcome and thank you to our new officers. That's pretty exciting. Many of our neighbors have heard about some of the solidarity efforts this weekend with our local Everett Herald journalists and the sad news about that. Local news is a really important component to our communities, and it was something that was extremely beneficial to me as a volunteer when we had issues in my neighborhood about contaminated soils, and getting that information out there to the rest of the community and elected officials and others about the dangers and the health concerns and what we were dealing with. And eventually that led to change. But it's because we had investigative journalism locally that we were able to do that. So I too stand in solidarity with our local journalists and support local news. I did attend the DNA Delta Neighborhood Association combined meeting with the Everett Housing Authority on the Park District and the proposed changes remotely. So I appreciate them making the effort to have that available online as well as in person, and for all the community members that showed up, and for the presentation, and especially for the Delta Neighborhood Association, everyone volunteering with that. Excellent work, really good information presented, and it seemed to win off well. I too attended Everett Pride, and my goodness, it rained like crazy, but it was still a lot of joy there. It was really nice to see everybody coming together. And since it has been 2 weeks, we also had the Wiggums Hollow park ribbon cutting, and my kids were there, and they were pretty excited to be a part of that. And I couldn't drag them away from the new playground because it was quite a hit with them. And I really appreciate the way that our city staff and administration really made an effort to incorporate the character of the neighborhood when it comes to the diversity that we have in our neighbors, our history of welcoming in immigrants. And you'll see that in some of the park playground design, really kind of, giving a nod to our neighbors there. So I appreciate that really intentional work in designing that. I wanted to say happy 4th of July, since we won't be seeing you again before that. And two questions that I had. If maybe the administration can educate us a little bit on what, because I heard your concerns about the bamboo, and my goodness, I would be terrified. I'm dealing with horsetail right now, just trying to get rid of that. So I feel the nerves about that. What is the process for when neighbors encounter that? Maybe not necessarily in this specific instance, but when it happens to any neighbor, when they're dealing with that kind of issue, perhaps if you could provide, I was wondering if Jennifer Gregerson could answer it. Generally, what should neighbors be doing?
I will find out.
Okay, great. So stay tuned for future meetings with better kind of general instruction, because I would be really curious too to know. We all try to be good neighbors, but sometimes, you know, these things happen where we have issues with invasive species in plants that can be obnoxious. I also received a comment from a community member about our SEPA process, and I thought I remembered something, a discussion somewhere where we had about how that process is not exactly very accessible for, you know, regular neighbors to really navigate. It's very technical and complicated and difficult to understand. Does anybody recall when that discussion, when that came from, if that was from maybe one of our retreats or where? I thought that we,
I totally appreciate the concern. The State Environmental Policy Act regulates kind of what the elements are that are reviewed when a project or a proposal is undergoing that review. So sometimes just a neighbor might have a frustration about their community or have a concern about a development, but it doesn't fit into those kind of the specific elements of the State Environmental Policy Act and how that environmental assessment is done. Doesn't mean that those comments aren't reviewed and considered. They just may not, sort of through that environmental assessment process, might not always get kind of the answer that one might think you would. Like, I've been asking for a stop sign, as an example, asking for a stop sign here at this location for years, but now this new development is going in and I want them to put in the stop sign. That is a clear case where it's an existing condition and it wouldn't be required of a new development. So things like that can be frustrating. I think that I'll share the concern about accessibility for how to engage with it. Our planning department, and Norick is here for your later item, but they've done a lot of work to make sure that the website has stuff, you know, at the ready. The Park District item that's before you tonight has a beautiful webpage with all of the information. Complex, true, but it's all there and easy and accessible. But I'll pass on the desire to kind of make it, maybe there's other examples or best case practices for how to make it easier to understand and follow.
yeah, I think that's kind of where my concern, and I remember coming at this from you know, just a neighbor point of view, trying to navigate that system and understand what we're looking at, the elements we're really kind of focusing on, and then kind of breaking it down and making it easier to engage in that process. And if our concerns don't fall in line with that, where would we go? Navigating that was always kind of a challenge, and I've heard that repeatedly from neighbors. So if we could keep in mind, I know we sometimes get in our technical bubble of talking about things in high detail, and that is great because that is our jobs, and our staff are amazing with that. But a lot of our neighbors have challenges, you know, because that's not necessarily their job, and so maybe a little bit more guidance and assistance accessing that. I know it helps me. And then lastly, happy birthday, Edison. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Zarlingo.
Well, as someone who has a current subscription to the Herald and is off and on subscriber back into the 1980s, I've said before I really value the paper and the contribution of local journalism, and I support the staff there. I'm encouraged to hear that they're talking, which sounds like it's something that did not happen before these announcements. So I hope for some good news that way. But I do want to echo the sentiments about the value of our local journalism. You know, it's the comment about trees is an important one. Just today in a meeting, there was a discussion of some resources to try to get the right trees in the right areas, and also to try to balance the trees and tree cover we want to have with the increased population density we have. One of the real problems that extends from middle housing to higher density housing is to have that tree cover and the amenity, the benefit it provides, but with larger lot coverage. And that really makes it even more vital that we put the right kind of trees in the right area, and probably are going to be more aggressive about getting those out. And then with respect to the right plants in the right areas and avoiding the opposite, I think there is a term, Mr. Hall can perhaps tell me for, I don't mean invasive plants, I mean troublesome plants that a city can prohibit the planting of. I can't remember, I think English ivy years ago was
Noxious
plants?
Noxious weeds?
noxious. Yes. So I guess something that'll be in the back of my mind and maybe a later conversation is some of these things, if they, as I know bamboo is, some varieties, if they are that troublesome, perhaps there would be a reason for us to declare certain of them noxious, and that way reduce the planting of them, or maybe give us some tools to get them removed when we can, because I know sometimes the removal techniques are pretty rough. Couple of other quick things. The Puget Sound Regional Council attended their Transportation Policy Board meeting a little while back, and they talked a lot about one of these things that's important but boring, and that is traffic-related injuries and fatalities. The Regional Transportation Plan, this is for the 4-county region that PSRC governs, requires development of a safety action plan. And what they're really trying to do is, especially acute right now, trying to reverse some really bad trends. Since 2019 or so, there have been some dramatic increases in injuries and fatalities, and in the rates of those. And it's not just because of the increase in population or because people are driving more. Some of it may be distracted driving, some of it is impairment, some of it is higher speeds. The distractions may be undercounted, so that may be a significant part of it. But interestingly enough, rural areas are 2 to 3 times higher in fatalities and injuries than the urban areas. So there's going to be a focus on high injury intersections, and we have some of those. I guess stay tuned. This is something that the Regional Council is paying attention to, and with a great deal of justification. Some of these numbers in injuries and fatalities are taking us back to a couple of decades ago, before we had ubiquitous airbags and anti-lock brakes and traction control and stability control and all that. Then lastly, today is the meeting of Snohomish County Tomorrow Steering Committee. One of the interesting pieces of that is we're now working on our comprehensive plan, as is the county and other cities, and there's going to be some work to reconcile those things coming up. So I guess just generally, this is another one of those multi-city, multi-entity agencies that's working to coordinate things that are going on in different municipalities, different areas. And certainly I'd encourage anybody to get involved in the comprehensive plan. Make your wishes and preferences heard. We can't stop the growth, but we can influence how it's spread out among the communities and how we implement it here in ours. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, just a little bit for my report. I did attend the View Ridge Neighborhood Association, and the mayor did a fantastic job speaking on Proposition 1. There seemed to be a lot of support in that group, although there was a lot of discussion about traffic and the speeds in our neighborhoods. So I'm looking at Corey Hurt out there. You have a very busy next year, because it is certainly a theme. Also, there was a lot of discussion, or some discussion, on our zoning plans and the things that we're looking to change in the future. There seems continually to seem a lot of support for the options that condense the growth to highways and transportation corridors versus more of the spread out version. That's a common theme that I'm seeing in my district. I had the privilege to represent the city to the Washington Telangana Association. It's a province in India that has celebrated their 10th year formation, and they're really about developing cultural and educational and social developmental activities for those who call India their native land, and it was very well attended, and it was amazing experience, and it's good to see that, once again, how diverse Everett is, and what a large population of those from India, descendants of India that live in our communities, and it's just a wonderful experience. I also want to just make sure that we know not to show up on July 3rd. You can if you like, but I wouldn't recommend it because we won't be here. And I'm very thankful that we can give a break to the staff. I just want to recognize the mayor's staff for all the hard work they do. They're here every Wednesday and really appreciate it. And for the most part, we try to keep them awake, but all seriousness, they work really hard, and I really appreciate it. I know on behalf of the council, we really appreciate them. I also attended, or I'm on the AWC, Association of Washington Cities Legislative Priority Committee, and we had one of our larger meetings here this last week. And it's interesting to see that we're not alone in the challenges we have here in the city of Everett. We seem to have other cities in Puget Sound have the same challenges. So nothing really new to report except the same broad categories that we've been speaking about: public safety, housing, yes, childcare, those type of things that we've been talking here, and our leadership group is just parallels other cities. So at this point, we're kind of narrowing down on just some formation of our positions. Keep in mind the state legislature and the way it works, it's very fluid. So our attentions move from, as Councilmember Foss may know, our attention could move from bill to bill to bill. So depending on what has legs and what's brought up. So a lot of good discussion, and it's good to see that we have a group of mayors and council members up and down Puget Sound, really all on the same page in dealing with the struggles that we share. I think that's it. So I appreciate your time, and we'll move on to admin support.
All right. As the mayor noted, we'll be following up on the question regarding Colby Street trees, and then as you guys have talked, as well as invasive species and noxious weeds. You heard from Mr. Miller tonight about speeds on Rucker near 21st. And just kind of a recap, I noted 2 weeks ago that the Safe Streets for All grant that you're approving the contract, the PSA for tonight, will help us address this. One of the first steps in that grant implementation is to review our arterials and secondary arterials. That section of Rucker between Everett and 19th is a secondary arterial with a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. So with approval of tonight's agreement that's on your consent agenda, the grant consultant and our streets team will be able to conduct the engineering and traffic investigation that's required by state law before making a determination to reduce speeds. The Safe Streets for All action plan is also aiding in a review of all of our neighborhood traffic calming policies. And then the last note is that section of Rucker is a likely candidate for an overlay in the not too distant future. That's always an opportunity to review striping and look at other improvements to reduce speeds. So that's it. Yeah.
Questions for admin support? Okay, on to our city attorney, Mr. Hall.
No report and no executive session.
Okay, and you won't be here next week?
I'll try to remember that.
Okay, good. All right, before you, we have a lot of consent items. Items number 1 through 14 before you. Do I hear a motion to accept them?
Councilmember Bader so moves.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for consent items 1 through 14. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Ryan?
Yes.
Councilmember Bader?
Yes.
Councilmember Tui?
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely?
Yes.
Councilmember Fosse?
Yes.
Vice President Zarlingo?
Yes.
President Schwab?
Yes. All right, so next we have a combined public hearing and proposed action items, all which have had a second reading, and they've been read in the record. So the third and final reading will be July 10th, 24. So at this time, I'll excuse Councilmember Tui. And so we'll have a presentation from our planning director, and then we'll open up for a public hearing.
Good evening, Council. York Stephen Swaj, Planning Director. Following me will be EHA Interim Executive Director Mary Swenson and Jason Morrow, EHA Real Estate Director of Real Estate, something like that. What I'll do before is just cover 3 amendments that have been proposed to accompany these 3 ordinances: Plan Development Overlay and Development Agreement, the Street Vacation, and the Comprehensive Plan Amendment. These amendments would apply to the Plan Development Overlay and the Development Agreement ordinance. These are have been forwarded to the council in a memo this week. That memo is attached to the item 15 at the end of the agenda packet. It's also available online on the EHA Park District webpage for folks to follow along from afar. I touched on these amendments a little bit last week in brief. We have the full language now in that memo, and I'll cover the 3 amendments that would occur to these ordinances. There are some other updates that I addressed last week that I won't touch on, but we'd be happy to take any questions. The first proposed amendment addresses the wetlands in the natural area that are due west of the Park District property, or the Park District site. These wetlands and natural area are currently owned by the Boys and Girls Club. We don't have a lot of wetlands and natural areas in North Everett, and the Delta neighborhood has been interested in seeing this area enhanced for educational and interpretive use, consistent, of course, with the core functions and values of the wetland themselves. EHA has issued a letter of intent describing their commitment to mobilize stakeholders towards a collaborative effort towards transformation of the wetlands to a conservation and education use and an outdoor public amenity. On the city's side, staff proposed an amendment that would add a recital to the Plan Development Overlay Development Agreement Ordinance, recognizing the importance of natural open space, stating our willingness to partner with EHA and other stakeholders to explore city acquisition of the wetland and natural area, and to explore options for an interpretive trail or viewpoint consistent with the wetlands' environmental functions and values. A careful reader may notice a couple of stray words in there. Clearly, I was debating between options or feasibility. I think options is the better one, and we'll correct that for your packet next week. The second proposed amendment addresses improvements to the pedestrian system around the proposed project site. Under the proposed development agreement, EHA is responsible for transportation impact fees that would normally be assessed for residential development under EMC 19.51. That's our transportation mitigation chapter of municipal code. The amendment that is proposed would add a section to the development agreement that would provide for EHA constructing a set of sidewalk and crossing improvements around the Park District, the cost of which would be credited against the impact fees. The specific improvements identified include Baker Street West Side sidewalk connection from Poplar to 15th Street. This is a very small section of missing sidewalk outside of the boundaries of the project itself, where the curve is there right across the street from Baker View. It would also provide for continuous sidewalk connection on the north side of 15th from Baker to Broadway, an improvement to the pedestrian crossing infrastructure at 16th and Baker, including replacement of existing flashers with rapid rectangular flashing beacons, which is a best practice for safe pedestrian crossings at an uncontrolled intersection. And then continuous sidewalk improvements on one or the other of 14th or 15th from Pine to Marine View Drive. So all the yellow highlighting on there. Again, these improvements would be built by EHA, and then the cost of which would be credited against the impact fees that would otherwise be assessed to the project, which we've estimated at just under $5 million. I don't think that these sidewalk improvements would take up all of that fund, so there would remain impact fees available for citywide improvements. Lastly, non-residential space activation and occupancy was a concern. The Park District proposal includes some retail and small commercial spaces as well as civic uses. This was brought in at the request of the neighborhood and is something that has been desired for a long time in the heart of the Delta neighborhood there as a place to grab a cup of coffee or do some light shopping. There's also a concern that that non-residential space would be difficult to fill. And so EHA has issued a letter of intent regarding this, and it addresses focusing on neighborhood scale retail opportunities that provide synergistic opportunities with each other and contribute to the activation of public amenity space, providing substantial support as needed to ensure retail feasibility and competitiveness, and then identifying a preferred timeline for retail tenancy. The amendment, that was a letter of intent that was issued by EHA. An amendment is proposed to the development agreement, would add a new section that addresses some of the same topics with this. It would require EHA to sequence the building construction so that the retail and commercial spaces are ready for leasing no later than 6 months after the residential spaces. EHA will use reasonable efforts to attract tenants for project retail and commercial spaces, including using advertising and brokers. EHA would provide commercially reasonable rent and tenant improvement allowances and incentives. Maintain vacant space in good condition. If a commercial space is vacant for more than 6 months, EHA would further maintain the attractiveness of the space, and I think things like window wraps and the like are identified. And then this development agreement will terminate at build out of the project, and so everything that's in that development agreement would terminate as well. If there's a history of long-term vacancy of some of the commercial spaces, even though the project is built out, then EHA and the city would enter into a binding agreement that would pull forward this section of the development agreement into a new agreement that would last for the operation of the development. Those are the 3 amendments that staff recommend including in the ordinance. There's no action necessary tonight. This could be moved and amended into the ordinance by the council in 2 weeks' time at the 3rd reading. Just wanted to get that before you with some explanation and some details on the topics that we covered last week. I wanted to address a couple of council questions that we've heard over the last couple of weeks regarding the height reductions that is already included in the packet before you. The first one is that a keen eye noticed that if the maximum building height was reduced from 15 floors to 12 floors, which it was, why are there a few references to 15 floors in Exhibit C, which is the site plans and the maps? There are some building elevations that do stretch beyond the 12 floors, and then there's a map with some dots and numbers on them that show which of the buildings would be how high. The regulatory limit on the building heights is in Exhibit A1, that is the Plan Development Overlay Exhibit, and that does have a limit of 12 floors. This was a late change to the project, and the design team would have taken some time to reflect that in those elevations, which is a side view of the buildings that is in Exhibit C. So rather than rework all of those at these stage, a note was added to every page that showed a building or otherwise indicated something taller than 12 floors that says this, it's recognized that this exceeds the 12 floors. That will be fixed and redesigned as part of the final development plan step, which is the next step after what Exhibit C is the preliminary development plan. So it was intentional that that inconsistency is there. There's a note on every one of those pages to make sure that that there's at least limited confusion. The second question was about what the implications of reducing that height were. So we had a design at stages of this process that had buildings up to 15 floors. I think there were 4 of them or so. Obviously that would reduce the amount of building space that was available. I think it might have been me that either implied or said that that would lead to, in the final development plan, a reduction of the park space. That is not how it's going to go. The 15 floors was an extension of an earlier design that had 12 floors in it. It would have provided EHA flexibility in the design So again, the next steps of this project would be from the preliminary development plan that we have now, there's a final development plan that has another set of details, needs to be consistent with everything that's in your packet today, and then it would proceed to building permits, construction documents for actual buildings. So there's room for detailed architectural design of the buildings. The flexibility of being able to go up to 15 floors might have allowed for a reduction in the building footprint and an increase to the park area and to the open space in the development. With the reduction of the maximum height to 12 floors, that flexibility has been reduced, but the program that you see on that site plan is still buildable, and the park area is safe. Those were a couple of questions that came up since then I wanted to talk about. EHA may have some additional information on that, and they have a few slides that they wanted to go over, but that's the end of my notes this evening. I think Jason or Mary will come up. I promised you a chair, so what I will do is go hang out by the podium here.
And then after the presentations, we'll open the public meeting, and then we'll have questions and comments from council members.
Good evening. My name is Mary Swenson. I'm the interim executive director of the Everett Housing Authority, and it's really good to be here, and it's really good to be at this point in the project where we can have a public hearing and update everybody on all of the changes that we have made as we've progressed through this project. As you can imagine, this is a pretty significant project. There's been an awful lot of work that has gone into this. So I'd like to just go through the slides, and if you have any questions at the end, we'll be happy to answer them. So this is a slide that kind of does an overview. It's the artist's visualization of the development plan. And you'll see that in the middle, the park area, that's about a 1.5 acre park within the middle of this development. And that's pretty significant. And also, the open space and the tree canopy that is going to be available in this development is very, very unique. And why it can be so unique is because we have the underground parking. So we've put the parking underground so that we can then expand the park area and keep more trees and make it really an attractive place to be and to walk through, and a real desirable development for the neighboring community. EHA is the next slide. EHA is a really very unique partner. I think it's the next slide, Jason. Oh, there's one missing, so I'm going to talk about the one I have in front of me. I want to talk about the partnership that EHA has and how that is so much different than just a developer that comes into the community, because I think there's some real significant differences to that. You know, we're fully aligned with the City of Everett's thinking about housing, and we want to help accommodate the housing needs that has been identified by the city. And we want to look at a different range of affordability. So we want to look at all ranges of affordability of housing. Infrastructure paid is, we pay for the infrastructure for the development, so that's very, very important. Active park space, publicly maintained. It becomes a walkable neighborhood. Local retail and services, childcare and daycare included within. But I think overall, what we're very, very excited about is that we're going to help Everett get to what they need in housing. I think I wrapped my address last time up with really what we're here for is housing. And I think when you're dealing with such a big project like this, that sometimes that gets lost in the details of the project. But it's very important that we provide the housing that's needed within the city. And I think that this is a very unique opportunity to have 16 acres that can be developed in a really showcase development for the city. So the positive fiscal impacts. If you look at what this development is going to pay as far as improvements to the area, you're looking at $87 million. Which is very, very significant. And It's going to basically increase parks and transportation through the impact fees. The retail and civic amenities that's included is 56 billion. That includes some of the tenant improvements that we have talked about in the past, and how we're willing to do that to make sure that we get the right tenants in there and that we fill those spaces. The new infrastructure that's included is 0.9 miles of streets, 1.6 miles of sidewalk, and that, the 1.6 mile of sidewalk is the sidewalk that is within the park development itself. It does not include the sidewalks that was referenced by the planning director on the additional sidewalks that will be available to the neighbors. Public utility, water, sewer, storm, and then the park and open areas that I referenced before is the 1.5 acres. The fiscal impacts, again, we're going to be providing housing. There's 339 vulnerable people that will be housed within this area. We work with a lot of the neighboring agencies, YMCA. There's some other agencies that we're working with to get some kiddos into some tuition-free early education, and then the park area maintenance for a grand total of $78 million. Why we support the plan, I think this was the slide that I had way in front of what it was supposed to be. So I think we can go through that. And also jobs, I think that's the other piece that I didn't talk about that's on that slide. This will provide a pretty significant amount of jobs as this development goes forward. So now a real kudos to the Delta Neighborhood Association. We have worked incredibly hard with them. We've batted a little bit, worked it out. I have to say that in my first meetings with all of you, and especially with the mayor and Councilmember Fossey, it was pretty clear Everett needs housing, but if we're going to do this development needs to be done right. And we need to be talking to the neighborhood, and we need to be listening to them, and we need to just not be, saying, yeah, that's okay. We need to actually put some things in that is going to make this a really solid development. So kudos to the electeds. I've worked with a lot of electeds in my career, and I've found that working with the Everett electeds and what they want for their citizens really came through as I worked through this development, so kudos to you. So we started with the building heights. I think I told you when I came into this role, I was very critical of this project, extremely critical, because I kind of had watched it from afar, and then all of a sudden I was in the middle of it. So we listened to, well, what can we do? Can we bring down the heights a little bit and still maintain some of the same things? And we found we could. And we found that that was acceptable to the neighbors as we worked through that. So that was like the first thing that we talked about. The emergency services cost. We know that we are a tax-exempt agency. I come from a city background, so I also know what that means to a city. So we have worked through the SEPA process in order to provide some money for police and fire services. That is unusual. It's very unusual. It doesn't usually happen. But we did feel that it was important to assist the city in getting this property developed properly and also having police and fire services that are necessary. And I will say that it's kind of a complicated formula, so I don't want to get into it because it is very complicated, but I will say that it does escalate over time. So we didn't agree on a number that number stays the same. We agreed on a number that would escalate by, actually, I think it's positions within both police and fire. So those positions, as those positions escalate, so will the amount of money that is paid per unit to the city of Everett. Community spaces, we are talking, and we have tentative agreements with Bezos Academy, YMCA, Shack Art Center, Boys and Girls Club, and we're continuing to work with other partners to make sure that we have the right services and the right folks in those spaces that will help the neighborhood and make it a better place. Residential parking zones, this is actually a city-initiated item. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I'm not going to be administering that, or I'm not familiar how that works internally. But I will say that that was something that Councilmember Fossey worked incredibly hard on with the neighbors. Pedestrian connections. We worked really hard on looking at the sidewalk situation, and having come from a city background also, it is very unusual to come to an agreement that we have come to on the sidewalks that will really assist that neighborhood. I spent a lot of time driving around that neighborhood since I got here. I have witnessed people in wheelchairs trying to get places, and I think the end result on what has been negotiated here, both what EHA will provide and also what will be done as a credit back on the mitigation fees, is a really, really good thing for the neighborhood. To preserve the Wiggums Hollow Park. This was probably on the top of the list when I got here, as I heard, do not take the park away. And somewhere along in the translation and talking about this, there was a thought that EHA was going to sell that park or develop that park in some way that it wouldn't be a park anymore. And that's far from what we plan on doing. So we did a letter of intent indicating that that was not what we were going to do. We felt that it was important to the neighbors to see that in writing. That was signed by myself and our chairwoman, Corin Smith. The Delta wetlands, this was another thing that I looked at when I got here. In fact, it was brought up to me by Bill Chuklis from Boys and Girls Club. There had been discussions going on already between City of Everett. We kind of got into the discussions and how can we make this actually an asset to this project, and kind of Boys and Girls Club does not need that property anymore, so what can we do to make it an asset? And I think what it's really done is it's added more green space into a property that already has a lot of green space to it, but it just makes it feel even better and bigger, and we put some trails in there, it will be a showcase. The retail vacancy, I heard this loud and clear, really from a lot of the council members, and I know why, is, when you drive through a community, you don't want to see vacant spaces. It just doesn't give a feeling of a prosperous, energized city. So we recognize that. We had already decided that that was not something that we wanted to see. It wouldn't do our residents that are going to be living in that area any good, and it also wouldn't attract the residents that we want in that area. So we have agreed to do some tenant improvements and all the things that York talked about in his presentation on how we will make sure that we get some right folks in there. This is another visual of the project. And that's it. I had a whole bunch more. I was going to talk so much more. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I really want to give some kudos to some people, though. First of all, I want to actually talk a little bit about schools. Because one of the things that I heard is, the schools in the area, and has anybody talked to the school district? I have met with the school district. We've talked about this project. We also talked about them partnering on the Boys and Girls Club wetlands property, and can we do some kind of a unique partnership there where the kids in Hawthorne can maybe come over and use that as a teaching situation. There was a similar project that I worked with in Marysville that it was the exact same thing, and it butts up behind a elementary school, and they use that constantly. So it is something that's doable. When I was talking with them, we also talked about the number of residents that were going to be coming in from this development, and the planning process that was needed in order to make sure that they could accommodate those students. We also regularly engage with the school district because of our proximity of housing in that area. We spend a lot of time with the school district, and we service a lot of the students in that area, that live in our residence currently in that area. And we will continue to do that. So the people I want to give kudos to, Mayor Franklin. I think our initial conversation made real clear your passion for housing, but also that it needs to be done right. Councilmember Fossey, you need to be getting this neighborhood, okay with this, and I heard that loud and clear. Delta Neighborhood Association, you guys have been awesome to work with. I know that these projects are hard. They're really hard projects, but I'm hoping that when this is built, you're going to say, wow, this is really a showcase and has done lots of really cool things to our neighborhood. And to your staff. I cannot say enough about the staff and the working relationship that we have developed. All the way from the police department, who I met with the chief when I first got here. He has been awesome, and you were very impressive in that swearing in. Good job. I think that the work that has been done with Dan Templeman, with Yurick, your public works director, who we worked with a little bit. I know Jason has worked with all of these folks ongoing, but the work that has been done and the thinking out of the box into how can we get this done right and done that it's like those negotiations that nobody is really happy, but everybody walks away that they feel like they're heard. I think that that's what we have in this project. So kudos to everybody that's been involved. I very, very much appreciate it, and I will answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, well, thank you. Don't go away. We're going to have open public meeting, and we might
I'm
have
not going
questions for you
anywhere.
later.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this time I'll open public hearings. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
Yes, we have Donna, so if Donna could please come to the podium and state your full name, city of residence, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
I will. Good evening, I'm Donna Moulton, and I'm an Everett resident, and I am here representing Housing Hope and my role as CEO at that agency. We stand proudly in support of the Everett Housing Authority's ambitious initiative to develop 1,500 mixed-income housing units through the Park District development. For over 80 years, the Everett Housing Authority has been a cornerstone in addressing our city's affordable housing needs. They have been a steadfast partner in our shared mission to combat homelessness and poverty in our community. As you are aware, Everett is grappling with a severe housing shortage affecting people of all income levels. Our neighbors living in poverty or with moderate incomes are particularly hard hit by this crisis. The Park District project represents a source of hope for our community. This transformative development will bring forth 1,500 new units of safe and dignified housing, catering to families and fostering stability for a thriving future across a spectrum of income levels. We commend the Everett Housing Authority for their innovative approach envisioning a mixed-use, mixed-income community enriched with amenities and green spaces. Such thoughtful planning not only addresses housing needs, but also fosters a vibrant and inclusive neighborhood environment. The impact of the Park District project will resonate through Everett, making our city stronger and more resilient. For 1,500 families, this development will provide not just shelter, but a place they can proudly call home for generations to come. I urge each of you to support and provide your approval of this crucial development. Together, we have an incredible opportunity to make a lasting difference in the lives of our fellow residents and ensure a brighter future for our community. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes our public comments.
Okay, do we have questions from council? Okay, questions, comments?
A little bit of both. So if I'm hearing correctly, with the height reduction from 15 to 12, there won't be an impact to a reduction of green space. So will there still be 1,500 units, even though 4 buildings are losing 3 stories? And how will they meet that?
Yeah,
number.
that's what I understand from Everett Housing Authority, is that they are able to maintain the 1,500 units within the footprints, within the buildings, only up to 12 floors.
Thank you. I'm really grateful and glad to hear how far this project's come along over the last 6 months or so, and the incorporation of the neighbors and communities' questions and concerns. And I think the project has come a long ways, and I'm very glad to see where we've landed with this. I'm very excited for the future of Everett. I think it'll be a great flagship project for other large developments in Everett. Thank you for sharing the amendments today. I was especially glad to hear about the attention to the vacant storefronts, and one of the amendments mentioned the vacant storefront needs to be maintained in good condition or increased in attractiveness if vacant for longer than 6 months. And I would just request that that policy is applied citywide to all of our vacant storefronts, not just these ones here, so that we have parity in our policies and a uniform application for enforcement on that. So just as a request, with particular attention to our downtown core. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Zarlingo.
Well, thank you. I should note that I have some comments with embedded questions here. This applies to items 15 and 16, but not 17, the street vacancies. I'm part of the council's Built Environment Committee. I've reviewed the many hours of the Planning Commission hearings and public testimony. I've walked the site and the surrounding areas, the park and the other developments there. And I want to provide some context here, stuff that's important for me in trying to figure out how to vote on this. The council has responsibilities that are in some ways different from the Planning Commission. There are issues and questions that I've been looking at, and I'll try to summarize as briefly as I can here now, though there are a number of them. I mean, first, no disagreement. We need more housing, and that the costs of that housing are a big issue. And that includes both building costs and rental costs. There are no silver bullets here. Building is expensive and getting more expensive, and that's part of why this stuff is really thorny. It's a little bit like Sound Transit saying that they're not going to eliminate traffic in the area or dramatically reduce it. They're just going to keep it from getting worse. And so one of the real concerns here is I don't think we should paint a picture of making housing dramatically less expensive. These are going to be expensive buildings to build. They're going to be expensive amenities to add. Labor is expensive, materials getting expensive, and getting tougher all the time. So I want to be realistic. I guess maybe that's my main theme here. I also do want to credit the work of the staff, the planning department, the applicant, the neighborhood leaders and residents and council members. I mean, I think in a lot of ways this is how this kind of stuff should go, in the sense of being thoroughly examined. Now, my knowledge of these issues is incomplete and uneven, so if the experts here find something that I'm assuming that's incorrect or is misstated, please let me know. The development seems likely to take 10 to 20 years to build out. And while I and others can't predict the future, I can say with considerable confidence that some important elements of the environment and the assumptions behind this proposal will change during that time. However this turns out, we're going to want to have asked the essential questions and raised the important issues at this stage. I'm trying to look back now from a few years down the road, when if this proceeds forward, when we're looking back and seeing that there are changes, there are difficulties, some things go better than we thought, some things don't. I don't question the intent of the Housing Authority to build a good project or to do it right. And as I said, I think the process has improved this a bunch. But we don't control all of our future. We don't control the economics. We don't control the population things. And so what I'm trying to keep a good eye on and feel in years past or in years to the future, that I'll look back and say we asked the right questions. We looked at possibilities that at contingencies in cost, at difficulties in the site prep. And there are some other issues as well. As you know, we're working on a comprehensive plan update, and I also want to thank the planning department for their work on the plan and on the materials, including the story map. the comprehensive plan is going to govern what we're do or should govern it, and some of that is really hard stuff to internalize. The story map, especially including some of the sliders that go back and forth between the current plans or between different alternatives, has really been helpful. That map indicates that this area would otherwise change from the current comprehensive plan, mid-rise, 4 to 6 floors. In the two alternatives we're thinking about for the comprehensive plan, the height of this would actually go lower to a low-rise designation up to 4 floors in either of those two main things. So that's one of the things I think we need to keep in mind. We are talking about a development agreement and a plan that would be different than what we have expected for the rest of the comprehensive plan. So this is a departure. Not that we shouldn't depart necessarily, but we need to understand that we are actually engineering a departure here. Also, from today's Snohomish County Tomorrow meeting and the regional comprehensive plans should be consistent with PSRC's Vision 2050 and avoid increasing development capacity in areas not served by high-capacity transit. So this is not on Broadway. This would be a lot easier solution if it was on Broadway or it was downtown. I did a quick check in the map. A walk from a typical site inside this development along the sidewalks to Broadway and a bus stop is half a mile. Now, for the high-capacity transit proximities and transit-oriented development, you'd like that to be a quarter mile. Half a mile, especially in inclement or cold weather or in the rain, is a ways for a person who's got limited abilities or limited mobility or is elderly. That's an issue. Also, we've seen and see here the artist's conceptions. These are of the successfully completed development with all of its attractions and amenities, and importantly, its achievement of a critical mass that support those. And as the EHA director said, that is a part of an element of this. But to get to that point, you have to get through all the intermediate stages. And when we're talking about something that's going to be 10, 15, 20 years in development, lots happens. Hopefully lots of positive things, but I'm cautious about this. And so the residents in the years to come will experience and benefit from only a portion of that environment. And the danger is it may not be sufficiently attractive to justify the expected rents and occupancy rates. And of course, when the discussion here about non-residential spaces in the buildings, which are part of the amenities, part of the reason to live there, that completion commitment has to do with each individual building by building. So that means that some of the first people to move in will not be moving into to a space with the amenities, the shops, the daycare, et cetera, that will be there down the road, and maybe down the road 5 or 10 years. So if you're talking about moving in that case, you're more likely to think of what's in the immediate plans, and that's a limited set of things. So, there are neighborhood concerns that we've heard about and that I really appreciate the Delta neighborhood bringing up. There are also community-wide implications and responsibilities, and that's sort of where the council's view of this thing is going to differ, or at least its responsibilities are different than those from the Planning Commission. I don't know of any other determination of the demand and practicality or economic feasibility for this area or anything nearby for this scale. It's worth keeping in mind that we have a lot of developers, adventurous people who are willing to risk capital and do building, and we haven't done this yet, and we haven't done this nearby. If you're talking about underground parking and 12 to 15 stories, concrete construction, we haven't done that downtown. We haven't done it in nearby communities. I suppose Seattle and then maybe Vancouver. So we're talking about something here that, as with the comprehensive plan, it's a departure then from what's happened or what's been previously planned. Also, this is a novel development for this entity, the Everett Housing Authority. So a tall buildings, concrete construction, underground parking, lower quantities of parking. And then from my private sector experience in trying to do new things, it's much less risky to take new products to existing customers or to take existing products to new customers. A well-known way in the private sector to dramatically increase risk is to try to take new products to new customers. And here, largely, it seems we're taking a new kind of product, a higher rise, concrete construction, limited parking, and away, a little ways away from the major corridors, we're trying to take that to more or less market rate customers. So that's crossing a chasm that can be really dangerous because you're going new customers with new products. A difficult thing to do. And this is also an issue in this case in terms of what I understand generally a municipal housing authority is chartered to do. I think typically their focus is more on low income, disadvantaged and underserved communities or demographics. Market rate high-rise housing has generally been the domain of the private sector, and if I haven't seen them doing this kind of thing, then I ask sort of why not? If it is something that can be done well or done certainly or profitably with low risk, then I would imagine they would have done that. I did mention also the half-mile or so walking distance from the Broadway bus stops, and this is not where our current bus rapid transit, the Swift buses, are going to be running, although they'll be running on Broadway, but this is some distance away. Now, there are fixes for some of these things like having Everett Transit run buses from this area over to the other bus connections or divert some of their other routes. Let's see. And of course, there have been some addressing of the significant public safety and public resource commitments. I have some concerns that way because we're a city that's currently working on straightening out our finances with an initiative, Initiative 1. We have not yet resolved that. So we would be taking on some responsibilities because, again, some of these payments and things don't begin until 15 to 17 years from now. And I really do appreciate the agreements and negotiations and all the listening and discussion that's gone on during this process. That's what I mean when I say I think this is the way this kind of stuff should be examined so that down the road we aren't looking back and saying, gee, why didn't we entertain that possibility? Why didn't we understand that risk? Why didn't we understand what we are committing to? Part of the difficulty is there's a limited amount we can do in terms of binding agreements. This stuff proceeds, if it's approved, it proceeds forward in an economically viable way, or it doesn't. And what some of our community members are concerned about is that we miss steps along the way, that the environment changes, the demand changes, or that the fact that this has not been built elsewhere like this around here proves to be because it really wasn't all that practical. So I don't doubt the sincerity of any of the parties involved in this, and I certainly appreciate all the work that's gone into this. But so far, I guess I was hearing a lot of these kinds of concerns and seeing them from my own history, and I wanted to make sure these questions, these concerns were raised, that if we go forward with this, we understand that we and the Housing Authority are taking a risk, that we are doing something that is different than our comprehensive plan, that's different than our previous Central Everett plans, that's different than what's been done in nearby communities. And we should do that with serious deliberation, anything but being a Pollyanna in this case. That's it. Thank you for your patience. That was a long monologue.
Thank you.
And if there are questions or if I got something wrong now, later, email, voice, let me know.
Okay. Did you want to address anything? Okay, great. Thank you.
For the record, Mary Swenson again with the Everett Housing Authority. The first thing that I wanted to address, the retail space is going to be in the first phase. And so all the retail space that was talked about is going to be done in phase 1. So it will be within the first building.
The term said building, not phase. The commitment said building.
And Jason has worked.
I'm not sure what the phases are.
Yeah,
I don't think
okay.
they're identified in this here.
So I think just to try to address, there were some, I think within your comments, there were comments about whether or not childcare, for example, would be in which phase or whether it be later on. Just to be clear, the first phase, which is the northeast corner, is the phase that will contain Bezos Academy's 80 to 100 tuition-free seats. It will contain the YMCA, which will have daycare and also tween and other provisions. It also will have shack. So one of the core intentions of the programming and the phasing has been our response to both the community as well as council as well as planning commission's concerns about whether or not the public amenities would be realized in the short-term duration, considering the very long-term duration of the project. And so we worked very hard to put as much of those amenities in the first phase so that they'd be realized as early as possible.
So phase one is the building we see in the lower right, the northeast
Yeah.
corner.
Yeah, and so there will be some additional retail on the opposing street and what is most likely going to be the following phase. But the first phase is fully amenitized in the sense that most of the amenities we're talking about in terms of childcare, daycare, some retail, and shack will all be in that phase. So, our expectation is in the next, year and a half when we get
Is
construction
there a
started,
diagram anywhere of that? How many phases are there?
There's roughly 4 phases, or at least in consideration, there's 4 blocks. You could say that the south 2 blocks have the potential to kind of split phases, so they could extend into 6 phases, just making them smaller and easier to deliver. And when I say phases, they could potentially be delivered at the same time, but just in sequence, in the sense that one building structure would be delivered and then the other building structure would follow in a secondary phase, as opposed to delivering all at the exact same time, which is really standard in that style of project delivery.
There is a phasing diagram in Exhibit C, the preliminary development plan, in one of those pages.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also wanted to briefly address the transit too, because transit is in the area. It is a little bit of a walk. However, what my experience has been is as more people come into an area, the transit agencies look at that and then they adjust. They adjust accordingly. So that would be my presumption that that would happen as this more people start living in the area.
Mary, if I could add to that, so the bus stops on Broadway existing now. Community Transit is working on the Swift Gold line that would bring reliable, in its own dedicated right-of-way, frequent and high-capacity transit going both directions to job centers. So absolutely an asset. Half mile away is stretching it for some people. Others, it's an easy walk. The number 29 is going to have a bus stop inside the Park District. So that would connect to Everett Station and to the College Station in the other direction. Not as frequent as the Gold Line, but again, responding to the demand. I think that's something that folks would find very useful, especially in a commute sense.
Yeah. The other issue that I wanted to raise is, that you haven't seen a development like this before. But this is pretty unique to have 16 acres that you have kind of a blank slate in a pretty populated area already, and developing that into something that will actually change the character of the neighborhood in a good way. It will diversify a little bit, and I think that that would be a huge benefit. The other thing I wanted to address that you just raised was the development community and their ability to do this. I did review every bit of material when I came in, and I did review the letter from Craig Scottdale, and I actually met with him when I came in. I understand the issues that he raised in that letter. I agreed with some of them, but I also know that that is from a developer standpoint, that look and the comments. And I think we come from a little bit different, a different angle as far as development, but I also think you need both. You need both kind of partners in order to get those housing numbers that need to come to Everett. So while I did look at that, and I very much appreciated the comments that were raised, and I do also, know that the future, who knows what the future holds, and that's why we are doing this in segments, so that we don't overcommit. We're good stewards of the public money, and we deal with a lot of public money. So making sure that that is done right is extremely important. But I do really believe that there's room for both type of developments. Development that EHA can do, Hasco does development. There's a whole bunch of different development types that need to be accommodated. I also will say that this type of development that is kind of like a workforce development or cost-based development, it is done in other jurisdictions. We are not the first to do it, and the whole mission of housing authorities has shifted in a different way of how housing used to be provided through housing authorities. So it's kind of you know, how they've grown and how we've changed our direction based on where funding is and how we can get funding to do this kind of development.
Thank you. Councilmember
I'll-
Fosse, thank you. It's getting late.
I'll have more, but just initially, to follow up on, I guess the comparison about if this is the way that development should function and be, I think it was helpful to elaborate the difference between, you know, a for-profit developer that comes in and builds these spaces and may not be prioritizing mixed use and mixed income development for necessarily the community good, because they have a different motive behind that. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that, it's just, it's a different approach. And the reason why we're able to do this is because that is, for the EHA, part of their mission. And so they're trying to foster healthy communities. And so that is one of their goals. And that doesn't always have like a capital bottom line where that's their main operation. So using, you know, these public dollars to do a community benefit and public good is going to be a different approach, and they can function a little bit differently. And I think that's where a lot of some of our push came from, is because we knew what their mission is, and it's to do good things for the community in addition to providing this accessible housing. So it's a little bit of a different approach than we would get from maybe a for-profit developer who has other interests and priorities in mind. So I think what's come out of this is amazing, especially in the last month or two. I did want to ask one question based off of Jason's comment, saying that, and correct me if I am interpreting this incorrectly, but you said in the first phases where we will be seeing all the commercial development. That wasn't my understanding. I know you talked about Bezos, Shack, YMCA, et cetera, but I thought that each phase has its own first level there, especially with the concept designs.
So what I meant to say is that there's civic component and there's a retail/commercial component that ends up being the commercial spaces. And those exist really only in two phases. So if we're looking at the rendering here, it's in the north, both the northeast and the northwest. And the reason is because we've used that as a portal coming off 12th, as an entrance into the community to connect the Park District as a whole into the rest of the Delta neighborhood, and using that retail street as a place to both amenitize but also have a socially engaged place for pedestrian as well as vehicular movement into the neighborhood. So on the opposing sides of those two buildings are where the retail and/or civic spaces are, as well as on the first phase, you'll see basically in the northeast corner, right there where York has the cursor, is where Bezos and YMCA will be located.
So for the development of the SW2, SW1, SW3, and then all the SEs, you're not expecting any sort of?
No.
So if you're going to, in the future, prioritize a teen center, where would that end up going?
Right now, don't have a location for it, but it could exist in that phase. That's the next phase that's to the northwest.
Okay. And what about, you had mentioned some sort of small grocery at one point for food amenities.
Quite a long time in the past, we had talked about a grocery element. The neighborhood had asked if we could look into a grocery element. In discussion with both our retail consultant and the retail's consultant's broad experience, they determined that it's not possible to put in a larger scale grocery element, but something of around 5,000 square feet, 3,000 square feet, kind of small scale grocery was something more possible. So we have space allocated for that in both those first two phases, in the sense that there's some space that could be possible, but we haven't located a grocer that would be interested in that, and so it remains an option as opposed to something that's planned.
Would that be in the Northwest 3 or the Northwest 2? you were thinking?
I'm not sure when you say northwest 2 or 3. what
I'm
those
looking
refer
at
to.
your diagram map, and you have the northeast and the northwest, and the buildings were numbered. And then, because from our meetings, I have the northwest 3, it was described to me as there was going to be retail at the bottom floor of that one.
There is, but we haven't allocated any of those spaces for any specific uses. We're not even to the building stage of that. So they just are blanket spaces. It could be allocated for a grocery space, or it could be allocated for a pub, bistro, or a wide variety of use types. In the same way, in the first phase in the northwest corner, we have the allocation for the library, which was roughly around 5,000 square feet. We understand that that may not be a possibility, but it was an aspirational thing that we aimed to try to achieve for the community as well as for the project. But that space could fill a whole wide variety of uses. One of them could be a grocery, one of them could be a community space. There could be a whole lot of allocations for that. And so those are undetermined, but those spaces are pretty blank vacant spaces that can meet a wide variety of use types.
Okay, so then just to be clear, the southwest block and the southeast block, no intention of putting anything on the ground floor?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, and those phases would be built in after probably phase 1 and phase 2?
Most likely, yes.
Okay. I have other comments unrelated to that I can wait till the end, or if somebody else wants to ask.
Councilmember Ryan.
Thanks. I thought when we were pointing to the screen, the southeast block here along Fur was gonna have retail. Right there. Thank you, Yorick.
No, not in current planning.
Okay.
And part of the reason is because the whole intention was to create a social kind of neighborhood civic core with the concentration of retail, following a variety of concerns about retail or the viability of retail, based on both our experience as well as retail consultants' comments. You want to have the retail consolidated in one local space. You want it next to traffic or vehicular movement, and you also want pedestrian accessibility and just total activation space. So when you look a little bit closer at the planning, the central spine Park District Core provides basically open space, but it also provides an area for social engagement and grouping, and within that there's a plaza space that you can't see from the rendering, but in the first phase there's an element of it that's part of the concept around KSCR and a coffee shop that creates basically a central social engaged neighborhood core that engages into a plaza to kind of further enhance that activation.
Okay, thanks.
That
Yeah,
makes
I
sense.
must have misunderstood. Was when you first spoke, it sounded like that whole First Street would be one long pedestrian.
Roughly it's the center in between the buildings.
Okay, I misunderstood. Thank you.
Above that building.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I might add that this is kind of the beauty of developing in sections. Because if this is very successful in the retail space, and then we find out we go into a next building and the community wants additional retail space, we can do that. And, you know, that's flexibility there that we can do that. Or other community space, such as what Councilmember Fossey was talking about, the Boys and Girls Club, the Teen Center idea. You know, that is something that the community is interested in. That's something that we would have to work out with Boys and Girls Club, whether it be in one of these buildings or something in close proximity to the Delta neighborhood. Those are discussions that have continued with Bill Tooklis from the Boys and Girls Club. So it's not something that is off our radar. It's just that we can't nail it down at this point.
Okay. Any questions? Councilmember Bader or Vogely, do you? Okay. Councilmember Zarlingo.
That first phase section at the northeast there, about how many housing units is that?
270.
So 270, okay, so something under a fifth of the total occupancy.
Yes.
So that in that sense, the The residential occupancy will be biased toward the southwest, west to south and southwest. Okay. I'm thinking about that in terms of the stages of getting the heads in beds, as they say, that will justify the retail and the
Right.
other amenities.
Yeah, you need the rooftops to get the retail, yeah, that's.
Thank you. Councilmember Fosse.
I'm sorry, did you mention how many of those were going to be the subsidized, the lower income?
There was 300, zero subsidized in that.
Of the phase one? Of the phase one?
No, phase one doesn't have any expectation for subsidized housing, but we have agreed to 139 housing as replacement units of the public housing, for which we've already developed 105 of those. We don't know which phase that the subsidized housing will be part of. We'd like to see it in the second phase, but we haven't gone that far yet.
So given that so far down the line, that leaves our community with those missing availability of subsidized housing, that a lot of our neighbors had to leave our community because they couldn't afford to be here because there was no vacancy and no place they could afford when our neighbors had to leave Baker Heights. So given that, the sooner you can help them have more availability of that replacement housing, the better. I'm just putting that seed out there, not to wait till 10 years down the line, and that's when they,
Yeah, totally understand. And, we continue to work with those neighbors and continue to make sure that, they're plugged into the community and whatever we can do to help that.
I do have the rest of my questions now.
I'm anticipating them. Thank you.
I do think that the EHA's development approach to this and the collaboration with the community is going to end up in having a livable, walkable community with amenities that we have been desiring as neighbors for such a long time, as long as I can remember being there, where we had a collective conscience. And I do appreciate the work. There are a lot of things that I can see efforts to address. There are still some concerns, but that's within the negotiation and the bargain for having some of these benefits. Then, we have to have some issues. But I want to make sure that the city and the council administration, the EHA, does take notes, deep to their core notes, because I know staff moves on and, board members change and all those kind of things. But for instance, the community garden, in your first phase, you're going to be taking out the friendship garden. And so I'm curious when the intent to replace that, because there's people that are using that right now in the community, that is an asset to the community, and it's being taken out. What is the timeline for having a replacement available for the neighbors to use?
I can't tell you an exact timeline. What I can tell you is we will continue to work with the neighbors. We know that that's a huge asset to them, and we'll look at other areas in order to plug that in.
Okay. I can just see that being a heartbreak for a lot of the community as the development's going in, that sudden loss of not being able to have that amenity, and then having it so far where it's proposed to be, which my concerns about where it's going to be as a gardener with the shade. I don't think that's going to end up being the most viable place to have it. And so if there is going to be efforts to potentially put it somewhere else or utilize a portion of that Wiggums area, I would say that those efforts should be done simultaneously with the build out of phase one, because you were removing that amenity right away. And the community will feel that. And so that might be a
We'll continue to work with the neighborhood on that. We have those community gardens at our Baker View site, and when I walk through there, it's a huge amenity for the residents. So, it's not lost on us how important that is to the neighborhood.
I can keep going.
Sure.
All right.
That's what this is about. It's a big decision.
And then the other one, and I'll just keep reiterating on the Youth Teen Center, that one we are not pushing to have any letters of intent or MOUs. But I hope that to your guys' core, you realize that that is something that is not just what the neighbors are really saying is a priority for them, but that so many beyond that neighborhood can see that there is such a need for a space for our youth and teens to go. And with such willing partners that have come to council and spoken, that are willing to, you know, work together with the Everett Housing Authority, that becomes a priority, even though you aren't choosing to have additional space. If they don't end up fitting in that phase 2, I hope that you strongly take a look at your phase 3 and the development of that and make a place for them, because there's going to be a huge need with this influx of people. We already, with our current residents, don't have a place for our youth and our teens to go. And bringing in that many more folks and not providing that particular core thing, and I know we've had conversations about how important that is, but I just hope that by phase 3, that if you weren't able to come up with some solution in phase 2 that fits within the design, by phase 3 that you guys are really, really pushing for that element to make it happen, because that is...
Yeah, I can just address that a little bit. You know, I've worked a lot with Bill Tooklis in the past, and this is his flagship club. And when you talk to him, you can see the passion in his eyes when he talks about this location. So this work will not stop. The community got very involved. We went and looked at a teen center at Tulalip that Bill was involved in. So we'll continue that dialogue, and we will continue the work to get something located in that area. My understanding is that the current club down there has a teen center that is actually under construction, that they had some issues with. I can't really talk to that because I haven't been there, but I know that it is a priority for the Boys and Girls Club, and I know it's a priority for the neighborhood. So however we can facilitate that work to continue on, we will do that.
Are you saying that work to continue at their particular site or anywhere?
I think it's open.
Okay.
My discussion with Bill Tooklis, and I really can't, go
Yeah.
further than that, but there has been discussion about some different options.
So the transit-oriented development aspect and public transit, I think, is a very good point, because that ties into a lot of concerns about people will be driving into this, and I know that there's been a lot of mitigation with the sidewalks over 15th, and then trying to mitigate some of the traffic issues on 16th, because that'll be like kind of the main arterial that will be going through from Rainview Drive to Broadway, and that access point for people to come in to the development where they live. It is concerning, though, having the 12th Street be your primary access point for the commercial and retail, because that is the street where we have all the children. That is Hawthorne Elementary, that is the Boys and Girls Club, and that is an area that we may have to look at a lot of mitigation going in the future to make sure our traffic is very slow and cautious, and anything that we can maybe prioritize off of 12th to access that is something that the city's just going to have to pay serious attention to. Right now, it works. 16th right now is a little bit fast and doesn't, and so mitigation efforts over there will be helpful, but the 12th Street, because I walk my son to school there, they have volunteers that come out and help the kids cross, but increased volume in traffic may make that less of a safe spot for our kids, since you guys are targeting the 12th as being one of those main areas to access the development. So just putting that concern out there so the city and our future plans, and I know that there are efforts in our 10-year traffic plan. What is that? The TIP to have some changes to the Marine View Drive and Broadway intersection, and I'm really, really thankful for that. And looking forward, I've heard more from the city on you know, keeping an eye on that and making sure that that's going to be as reasonable it can be with, you know, development as we have anywhere. If the EHA, and this is a question for the city, decides that in the later phases that they want to have an increased height, not saying you guys are, but if that was something where, what would be the process for them to do that in order to increase the stories?
That would come back to the council in a process very much like this, but maybe a shorter conversation. So any amendment to the development agreement, to the plan development overlay would be legislative, and that would need to come to the council.
So 3 readings, community can come and participate. Would there be a hearing?
Yes, public hearing, planning commission would provide a recommendation, would have a public hearing there.
So it'd have to go to the planning commission, and then, so if there was any increase in height, that would be a well documented out there aspect, okay. And then, I wanted to say thank you, first of all, to the city for all of their work and their involvement. You know who you guys are. I appreciate how well and transparent you have been about this whole process and working together in the advocacy of not only for housing, but for the community's concerns to be heard was just great. And then, you know, recent efforts in working with the EHA, like, I've never seen such intense outreach coming from anyone planning to develop it in our community before. So I just wanted to say thank you for listening. You're still hold your own in a bargaining table, but it was very pleased with a lot of the amenities that came out. The one thing I do still kind of have some concern over, which might have to have some conversations after this. I do appreciate Councilmember Ryan's comment about the universal approach to the activation of public space and those requirements. So I'm interested to see where that ends up going. But the 6-month time frame. So the time frame was from 6 months for the retail space activation, and then it seems like it goes to like the end of the term of the agreement. So technically, there's not anything happening from the city enforcement-wise beyond upkeep of the area in this space. So what potentially could be that window? How long could that end up being from that 6 months to the end of the term of the agreement before the binding thing would kick in?
The binding thing would replace the development agreement, so it wouldn't be anything new. It would just ensure that those provisions continued on after the development agreement expired naturally.
The provisions of the upkeep.
Correct,
So,
yeah.
okay.
So some of them are continuous. Reasonable efforts to attract tenants starts immediately and continues as long as there is a vacancy or if there becomes a vacancy. The commercially reasonable rent and tenant improvement allowances similarly start immediately and continue. Sequencing the building construction makes sure that that we don't build the housing and then wait an indefinite period to fill out the commercial space, meaning do the tenant improvements to make it from a shell to something marketable. And then the further maintain the attractiveness of the space, which includes, if requested by the city, and this is if it's vacant for more than 6 months, painting windows with visually appealing scenes, display art or other displays of cultural or educational value, and EHA may propose alternative means to maintain the attractiveness of the space. So that's the one that begins after 6 months. The other ones would begin immediately. And I think EHA is motivated again as a community partner and with a public service mission that they're going to want to do a lot of these things anyways, and I think they've expressed along the consideration of this project that they had intended to do. This amendment to the development agreement would provide a measure of accountability, a measure of specificity, and maybe go somewhat beyond what they had originally planned for. But EHA has a strong, not only to get rent from the space, but also just to activate the space and provide a community asset. So I think this is a floor, and there's more beyond that.
So then after that 6 months, there's no real teeth.
They would need to continue those efforts. There are teeth that those efforts are engaged.
And then if they don't do that, what happens?
It would be a violation of the development agreement and a contractual issue.
Who enforces that?
The city as the other partner to the agreement.
So the city would have to give notice to the EHA, saying,
They've not held up their part of the contract regarding activation of the retail space and maintenance in a good condition.
let's have a meeting regarding just these particular tenants. I think the rest of the things that were presented were great. You guys have gone above and beyond what we would expect from any sort of for-profit development and collaborating with the community. But with that particular issue, I would like to chat.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would just encourage anyone that's in the room or that is maybe fast forwarding or stopping and moving forward as you watch the video, that this discussion is going to be a good reference for the future. So encourage those that might be interested in the project to view this. Do I hear a motion to continue the public hearing to July 10th?
Councilmember Ryan, so moved.
Second.
Okay, clerk, there's been a motion, a second. Please take the roll.
Councilmember Ryan?
Yes.
Councilmember Bader?
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely?
Yes.
Councilmember Fosse?
Yes.
Vice President Zarlingo?
Yes.
President Schwab?
Yes, and we will continue the public hearing in our July 10th meeting. With no further business, we are now adjourned.